The following episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television.
Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show. Looks like more and more people are starting to get nervous about Bernie or Bust in the public eye. People whose names are above the line, people who have a voice. This article by Julie Witzschlock is an indication of that. I don't think that Julie is somebody who is above the line necessarily. It's sort of a fluffy opinion piece, but it shows where some people's heads are. The danger of Bernie or Bust. A real and present danger, make no mistake. Last week's Iowa caucuses predictably became an incubator for online rumors and mutual accusations within the Democratic Party, a pattern we cannot afford to repeat in New Hampshire. Too late. We already won New Hampshire. The failures in timely and accurate tallying of the Iowa results seem to be a product of several factors. New and more complex reporting requirements, which were implemented in response to the Sanders campaign's entirely legitimate demand for greater transparency, a failure to collect the presidential preference cards from every caucus goer that serve as the backup to the precinct manager's worksheet tallies, and yes, introduction of Shadow, a new app that had been inadequately tested. But rather than take a holistic view of the problem, a small but vocal handful in the extreme fringe of the Sanders and Gabbard base jumped straight to the conclusion that the vote had been rigged by Buttigieg or the DNC or Hillary through Shadow. Oh my goodness! First came the rumor that Buttigieg was an owner or investor in Shadow. So apparently Julie has a problem with some of us conspiracy theorist tinfoil hat wearing Bernie supporters that maybe the DNC is trying to rig it again. Here's the scientific proof Julie offers. When challenged on his assumption that this fiasco was the product of a DNC conspiracy, a guy I know, a perfectly nice guy, responded, "Given the DNC's open hostility to Sanders, I think it is entirely appropriate to assume the worst in whatever form it arrives." Well, nice guy, anonymous nice guy, whoever you are, I think you're absolutely right. It is entirely appropriate to assume the worst because the worst has already happened and is happening right now. What accounts for the depth of this guy's mistrust? Is he still mired in his resentment of the DNC for denying Sanders the nomination in 2016? And then she says that Clinton won more votes than Bernie won. And she doesn't see how it was rigged, even though Donna Brazile says it was rigged. I'm not going to get into that now, but this is just so disingenuous, Julie. I don't know why his default response, this nice guy she's referring to, I don't know why his default response is to point the finger at those in his large amorphous camp of Democrats rather than at the party with a documented history of voter suppression. So she's still doing what all the blue dog Democrats are doing. She's saying, but the Republican Party is so much worse. Why don't you focus on them? Don't focus on us. We're not so bad compared to them. Come on, Julie. But what worries me, this is the good part, what worries me is that the people generating the conspiracy theories he shares are expressing the same nihilism that Trump voters demonstrated in 2016 when an estimated 1 out of 10 Sanders supporters. Now, wait a minute. Are you accusing Sanders supporters of being Trump supporters merely because they voted for Trump after you took away the candidate that they preferred? So she's going to call them Trump supporters, even though they're Sanders supporters. They would have gladly voted for Sanders. They had to vote for Trump in order to blow shit up. When an estimated 1 out of 10 Sanders supporters voted for Trump, desperately wanting change, not really believing it's possible, well, not with incrementalists, they'd rather just blow the whole thing up. I'm writing this not to attack Bernie Sanders, who is my number 2 choice, or the bulk of his idealistic, intellectually honest supporters, Rather, it's to plead with and warn that minority of Bernie or bust extremists that their indulgence in conspiracy mongering and dogmatism threatens to sabotage the change they righteously long for. And this is an Elizabeth supporter. Guess what, Julie? Elizabeth has no path to victory. The only reason Elizabeth is in it is to block Bernie. So, Julie, you really don't have a leg to stand on here. And if you're worried about Bernie Sanders supporters blowing the whole thing up and you say things like this, I think that 10% is going to increase. I would never tell people to vote for Trump. But you can bet that if this rigging keeps going on and this patronizing bullshit that you're spewing keeps going on, we're going to blow the whole thing up. Whether it's voting directly for Trump or staying home or voting green or whatever we do, we're going to blow it up again. You can count on it. Whoever this MSDNC commentator is, it's clear that she and her corporate masters are very worried about Bernie or bust and Bernie or Trump. Let's see what Nina has to say when she's asked about Bernie Sanders supporters who will not vote blue no matter who.
The majority of Democrats who helped flip the House in 2018 were moderates. James Carville made the argument over the weekend that Senator Sanders isn't a Democrat, he's an ideologue, and we've got to get practical. If he is the candidate, he is not going to be able to help win over the Senate. And unless you have the Senate, if you've just got the White House, you ain't going to get nothing done.
Stephanie, does practical mean that the 89 or so million people who are uninsured or underinsured in this country continue to suffer? Does being practical mean that we don't take steps in this country to deal with climate chaos and bring world leaders to bear? Does being practical mean that we continue to prop up a legal system that is unjust in every stretch of the imagination, that bears its weight down on black men and black women, and then by extension, if you are Hispanic or indigenous or poor? Does being practical mean that we don't say to the American people that you deserve better than what you are getting? That's not the kind of practicality we want. Does practical mean that you hold fundraisers and wine caves with Swarovski crystals with billionaires who want to control this system? Does practical mean we continue to go with the status quo while 500,000 people sleep on the streets at night? That's not practicality. So with all due respect to Mr. Carville, what the American people in this country need, they need somebody that is unabashed and that has the courage and the conviction to stand up for them and to call out the rigging of this system. And that candidate is Senator Bernie Sanders.
But steps and a revolution are two different things. In order to get to a revolution, you've got to take steps. And what James Carville...
Steps. That means incrementalism.
...is saying is you've got to get to a practical place to make those changes.
Stephanie, the elites in 1930 said the same thing about FDR. And he said, I welcome your hatred. These are the same people that if the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was still alive, when he stood up before he was gunned down and he said to this country, he said the evils of this country, militarism, materialism, poverty, and racism. Those are those same people. So now if President FDR had listened to those people, or if the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King had listened to those people, we would not progress as a nation. So every generation, we got the naysayers, baby. But what the folks of this country need, they need somebody that's going to stand up for them. Senator Sanders is known as the Amendment King. He knows how to get things done. But what people need is to be able to call upon somebody that's not going to capitulate.
Senator Sanders supporters, what is their number one goal? Is it...
Now look at this part. Senator Sanders supporters. Now we're not talking about Senator Sanders. We're talking about the supporters.
To start this revolution, or is it to defeat Donald Trump? And I ask because there's often a lot of talk around, will those supporters get behind another candidate if it's not Senator Sanders?
Nope.
Why can't we have both? You know, that same argument was made in 2016.
And a lot of those people didn't vote for Stephen.
However, though, Stephanie, more of Senator Sanders' supporters supported Secretary Hillary Clinton than her supporters supported then Senator Barack Obama. So let's set the record straight. People do want to defeat President Donald Trump, but they also want to know that they're going to have a fighter in the White House that's going to take it all the way, that's going to go ham on this system that has...
Okay, so she deflected it. She didn't say, Bernie Sanders supporters are not going to vote for your candidate if you don't nominate him. They're not going to vote for your candidate in the general election. Nope, she didn't say that. She said, Oh, why can't we have both? Now, Nina, I respect Nina absolutely. I hope she's the vice president. But what I want to tell Nina and this MSDNC commentator is you're right about Bernie Sanders supporters. And the more you fuck with us, the worse it's going to get. You mark my words, by April or so, you're going to see a lot of people saying that they're Bernie or bust. You're going to have, and then you're going to see all the finger wavers tell us, Bill Maher, he's going to tell us, hey, you're being so silly. No, we're just going to win, Bill. Bernie's going to get nominated against the corporate rigging of the DNC. Bernie's going to get the nomination because of Bernie or bust. Jacob Bacharach, Truthdig, says, what's driving Democrats Bernie or bust freak out? And a freak out it's becoming. Even before the debacle of the Iowa caucuses, in which the Democratic Party managed, despite its ineptitude, I don't know about ineptitude, I think they knew exactly what they were doing, to deny Senator Bernie Sanders a clear public victory by spiking the results entirely, there was a palpable sense of panic among the party's conservatives. Conservatives! For some reason, we have all agreed to call them centrists or moderates when they're actually conservatives. I can go with that. While his poll numbers remain fairly strong nationally and throughout the more heavily African-American South, Joe Biden seemed to be fading, in some cases almost literally before our eyes. You got that right. Once viable liberals like the prosecutor-turned-senator Kamala Harris or former HUD secretary and San Antonio mayor Julian Castro dropped out or never caught on, the several interchangeable governors from the Mountain West, how many? Who were they? We may never fully know, disappeared, as did the similarly interchangeable congressmen. Warren tacked slightly to Sanders' right, but remained far too left for America's insane political establishment, despite an agenda best described as that of a Christian Democrat in Europe. Klobuchar remained unbowed and unpopular. Buttigieg? Bloomberg? Might as well give it a try. What had become clear, however, was that just as a fractious Republican field had failed to coalesce around an establishment figure in 2016, aiding or at least permitting the victory of Donald Trump, so too would the presence of so many Democratic candidates redound to Sanders' advantage. That so many Clintonites have convinced themselves that Sanders is some kind of communist Donald Trump, that sounds like Bill Maher, a brooding Stalin to Trump's febrile Hitler, only makes their fear all the more visceral. Meanwhile, they fretted that this failure to unite would carry into the general election, just as they believed it did in the last presidential election. If Sanders supporters' original sin was backing another candidate in the primary, then their mythical failure to rally around Clinton against Trump was the evil and wickedness of man in the days before God sent the flood. Now, make no mistake, this guy is a moderate. This guy is one of those conservatives he's decrying. I will let you read the whole article, but he is trying to talk sense into the Bernie or bust / Bernie or Trump wild ass voters, and it's not gonna work. Into this fracas have swaggered several Twitter personalities, most notably the socialist lawyer and think tanker Matt Bruenig and the hosts of the popular leftist podcast Chapo Trap House. People are still losing their shit because of Will Menaker saying that he is Bernie or bust. And this guy says, well, I consider him a friend. I have been a guest on the show several times. Those are not bona fides for Bernie or busters. Turning the logic of unity so often deployed against them by Clinton supporters, they argued that if it was the duty of Democrats to line up behind the most electable candidate to eschew their own preferences of policy and personality in order to defeat Donald Trump, then it was necessary, obligatory, for all Democrats to support one Bernard Sanders. If Sanders diehards are the one unmovable block within the party, they reasoned, then a good portion of them were guaranteed to stay home if he isn't the nominee. Only by joining them could nervous Democrats cement the full party coalition and prevail. Yep, that's what's going on, Buster. This argument began, I think, as an only half-earnest provocation, a dare to the many voices in professional Democratic circles who preached unity so long as it aligned with their own preferred choices, but who reacted with incredulous rage if you suggested that it was they, not you, who might have to hold their noses and back a guy they didn't really like. But over the months, perhaps because of the outraged reaction it engendered among a cadre of former Clinton backers, it solidified into something more like an article of faith and later a battle cry of the Sanders supporting online left. This is my favorite part of the article, and then we'll leave it. This message makes people very, very angry. It is sabotage. It's blackmail. It's misogyny. It's juvenile petulance. It is the privilege of non-immigrants and white people who, if they have suffered at all under Donald Trump, have not suffered enough and would inflict him again on the poor and the vulnerable simply because they could not have their way. It is purity politics. It's unrealistic. It isn't fair. It's bomb throwing. It's masturbatory. It's disrespectful. It is impudent and insolent for these nobodies, these outsiders, these jokers who have never consulted on a campaign or designed a media strategy or jockeyed for a West Wing job or run a think tank. Although Brunig has in fact done at least the last. To make demands from a position of, let's be honest, some negotiating strength. And this guy is right. What's his name again? And Jacob is right that the movement strengthened after we saw the reaction from those freaking out. When we see Bill Maher freaking out, it just makes us more powerful. We welcome your freaking out. Please freak out more. The more you freak out, the more pledges we get. And in case you're watching this and you want to pledge, go to BernieOrBust2020.us and sign the Bernie or Bust pledge and help people like Jacob freak out even more. You can tell by the end of the article that Jacob is freaking out. He's trying to sound so reasonable to the petulant ones, and he's kind of acting as though he's taking their side. But really, at the end of the day, as Bernie likes to say, you're going to find out, Jacob, that we're not listening. We're not going to be reasoned with. There's no reasoning with Bernie or Trump voters. They're wild ass all the way. I'm a Bernie or Bust voter, not a Bernie or Trump voter. But I know better than to try to reason with Bernie or Trump voters. They're going to do what they're going to do. They're like a hurricane, and you better get the fuck out of the way. Steve Bannon actually understands what's going on with this leverage better than Bill Maher seems to. But what I suspect with Bill Maher, he knows that the Bernie or Trumpers are there, and he's just trying to ignore us still. But that stage of the game is just about to be over.
Guys, you've got to whine about everything.
Whine?
Look, the game is, it's match play, not medal play.
No,
win it, match play.
I understand
okay?
what the rules
Show me
are.
you could win. No, you know what the rules are and you can't win.
You're right.
You've had
You're right. We should. You're
Bill,
right. Hillary should have gone to Wisconsin because it's an electoral college game. I've admitted that many times. That's not the.
All Bill wants to do is blame it on the Electoral College. He doesn't want the Rust Belt to have anything to say. He's a coastal elitist, and it's so obvious, blatantly obvious, that he's just a condescending piece of shit. Now, we don't like Steve Bannon either, obviously, but here we have two assholes arguing with each other, and I'll let you decide which of the two is the bigger asshole. You may have gone into this thinking that Steve Bannon is the biggest asshole that could ever be, but I think Bill Maher gives him a run for his money.
The point you said, why do you win?
No.
You win because the game is rigged for you. I get it.
Absolutely not. It's absolutely not.
The electoral.
The Electoral College! The Electoral College! Oh!
With this attitude, the beauty,
I know
we're going to
you're
keep
enjoying
winning.
it.
We're going to keep winning. I love this.
Yeah.
I know you do.
Guys
I know you do.
How can you sit here? How can you sit here and have an oligarch, a Republican oligarch,
Bloomberg,
that's going to be the salvation of the Democratic Party? Okay, it's outrageous. You guys have screwed. Well, Bernie's been screwed by the Democratic Party. Look at the last week. They wouldn't allow the poll to be released where he was up 4. Okay, then they do this thing as soon as the whole debacle about the count. As soon as he starts closing in, the Democratic Party says, "Hey, let's have a recanvass." Okay. The Bernie voters are to do what they did in 2016. Right. We've had a belly full of the Clintons come either don't vote or come vote for Trump.
I understand why.
That's the Bernie or Trump. Yeah, they've had a bellyful. We've had a bellyful. And now our bellies are even fuller because the Tom Perez garbage, the shadow garbage, all the other kind of garbage. No, all this is pushing more and more people to Bernie or bust or Bernie or Trump. Just go on Twitter. You can see. And that's what's causing the oligarchs and their suck up cronies like Bill Maher to lose their shit.
You're against Bernie, yes. I mean, he has
like Bernie.
too much
I like Bernie.
Really, you want socialism?
No. He's a populist.
Did you hear what Bill said? Oh, really? You want socialism? You want socialism? Who's the fucking right winger here? Is it Steve Bannon or is it Bill Maher? Oh, you want socialism? But Steve Bannon understands it's not socialism. Why would Bill Maher not understand that it's not socialism?
Right, he's a socialist.
I don't agree.
Socialist.
Solutions. I think a lot of.
That's kind of a big part of politics.
No. The biggest part. One of the biggest parts is identifying the problem. I think Bernie's identified the problem.
Trump and him shared some voters because they both kind of go after the same problem. You're right.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm just saying
the Bernie people are help make Trump president.
But you don't
want
want
help make him president again.
Even I don't want that.
The Bernie people helped make Trump president, and they're going to help make Trump president again. Did you hear that, Bill? I don't think he heard it. I don't. Let's see if he heard it.
By the Democratic Party.
Even I don't want that amount of socialism. I agree we need...
Oh, brother. So he didn't even hear what he said about Bernie or Trump voters, that it's going to happen again. But I don't want that amount of socialism. Look, asshole, you're going to get Bernie or you're going to get Trump. You just got to come to that realization. You can call it socialism if you want, but you're going to get it or you're going to get Trump. You have to decide. You can bang on your high chair. You can complain about the Electoral College, but make no mistake, you're going to get Trump again if you keep banging on that high chair. Speaking of high chair banging, let's pivot now to Elizabeth and see how she does it.
But the fight between factions in our party has taken a sharp turn in recent weeks, with ads mocking other candidates and with supporters of some candidates shouting curses at other Democratic candidates. These harsh tactics might work if you are willing to burn down the rest of the party in order to be the last man standing. They might work if you don't worry about leaving our party and our politics worse off than how you found it. And they might work if you think only you have all the answers and only you are the solution to all our problems.
Yeah, so those are very direct attacks at Bernie Sanders, saying his supporters are mean, his supporters were saying curse words, saying he is going to basically burn down the Democratic Party and try to replace it with his own. So I guess he wants to burn down the corporate part and replace it with one for the people, which I'm for personally. And she ends it with saying that he, which we know who he's referring to, he thinks he is the only one who knows basically what's right, and she is presenting Bernie as an egomaniac who wants it, my way or the highway, which is the corporate Democrat strategy right now with Buttigieg and everything. Warren came out. Another notable change is instead of saying that she is fighting for big structural change, which is her version of copying Bernie, instead of saying that, she came out and said, I am fighting for core democratic ideals or values, core democratic values. So no more structural change, but now core democratic values. So she's trying to be more center again, attack Bernie Sanders. We knew for a while now, since 2016, what she did with Clinton and Bernie, who she sided with in that feud or in that battle, that race. We knew from then, and she courted Joe Biden to be his running mate. She tried being Clinton's running mate. We know all that. And then leading up to now, her flip-flopping on important issues to the more center side. Of course, their most recent trying to smear Bernie Sanders as a sexist. And up to now, CNN actually admitted today that the corporate wing of the Democratic Party wants her to stay in the race to make sure Bernie Sanders' stealing stays as low as possible so they could try to steal the nomination from him because they think he's going to get close to the delegate amount, but they don't want him to do good in either polls or actual popular votes. So they want Warren to stay in, and they're trying to force out other moderate candidates. Now, I'm not sure about the strategy because her rhetoric here is more moderate, more center. So will that get more center voters? Or is she trying to, that would further dilute the moderate pool. Or is she trying to just make Bernie Sanders look bad? Is she just she's another part of the Stop Bernie movement?
That's it, kid. You got it. This is good. This is Jola. I subscribe to Jola. I would recommend you doing the same. I just found him this morning. His commentary there was very good. His analysis of what Elizabeth is doing and why she's been put in there. She's doing exactly what she's supposed to be doing. And I think he nailed it. Pivoting to the center is just a last gasp effort. She's not going to, but she isn't going to drop out. She's going to see if she can siphon off Bernie voters to the end. Let's say hypothetically that you're a 35-year-old white woman who lives in Ohio or Pennsylvania. Let's say that you are a professional. Let's say that you're a middle manager somewhere, and that you would rather have Elizabeth Warren because she's a woman than Bernie. And let's say that you've donated to Elizabeth's campaign. Let's say that you really wish that Elizabeth would be president, just like you wished Hillary would be president. Now there are voters like that. Let's say that you're holding back and you don't want to vote for Bernie in the primaries, but you will vote for him in the general election as opposed to Donald Trump. So let's say that these reasonable suburban white female 35-year-old voters, who knows how many there are, let's say because they're 35, they're not 60, they're not boomers, they're not getting all the information from corporate news. Let's assume that Elizabeth has no viable path to the White House. She doesn't have any way to get through the firewall in the southern states. Right there, she's not going to make it. We know, if we're 35-year-olds, which I'm certainly not, we know from social media, we know from being awake, we know that Elizabeth can't win. So if we're still voting for Elizabeth, it's because we don't like Bernie that much. But what we have to face it now. You're going to get Donald Trump that way. You're absolutely going to get Donald Trump because Elizabeth can't beat Donald Trump. It won't happen because of the Southern firewall. It won't happen because of the Rust Belt voters who will vote directly for Donald Trump. We have to face that fact. If we're 35 as opposed to 65, we have to figure out that Elizabeth can't win. And so instead of waiting and voting for Elizabeth in the primary and then trying to vote for whoever receives the nomination later, you're getting Trump. The only possible way to defeat Trump is to vote for Bernie now in the primaries. So almost all the primaries are left. We still have time to figure this out if we're a 35-year-old voter. If we're a white, suburban, comfortable, middle manager kind of voter, we have to figure this out now. We have to vote for Bernie in the primaries. Whether we like Bernie or not, if we don't like Trump, then we really have to figure this out now. Pewdiepie is going out at the top of his game. He knows better than to keep going when he needs a rest. I think Elizabeth needs a rest, don't you? Maybe Pewdiepie, on your show, you could tell us to help Elizabeth on Twitter decide not to keep running. Because we all know the only reason she's running is because she wants to block Bernie. She's been paid to block Bernie. She is being promised a vice presidency for whoever ends up with a nomination. We know this. We know this. Put on our tinfoil hats. We know everything. Here's the part that millennial Elizabeth Warren supporters should understand. It is too late, absolutely too late for Elizabeth Warren to do anything except drop out.
Breaking news, everybody. Bernie Sanders has just officially been declared the winner of the New Hampshire Democratic primary. Bernie has 68,045 votes as I speak to you right now, and this is with 90% reporting. And Buttigieg has 63,761 votes. So that's a difference of 4,284 votes. And again, there's just, not enough votes out there for Buttigieg to make it up, even under a best case scenario for him. Now, what's interesting is that when all is said and done, Bernie will win by about 2 percentage points, but he'll actually win by a smaller margin than, when he won Iowa. Now, they're refusing to just flat out say that Bernie Sanders won Iowa, but indeed he did win Iowa.
He did.
And he won by 6,000 votes in the Iowa caucus, and it came out to about 3.5%. Again, this is going to be about 4,500 votes or so that Bernie wins by, and it's going to be two percentage points to 2.5 percentage points. But even though this victory is smaller than the victory in Iowa, because of all the fuckery surrounding Iowa and the fact that they wouldn't say that Bernie Sanders won, this is actually viewed as a bigger win for Bernie. It's a very weird situation, but Bernie Sanders won the Iowa caucus. Now he won the New Hampshire primary. But Amy Klobuchar is the real, outside of Bernie being the winner, and that's the number one story. The number two story is actually Amy Klobuchar, because Klobuchar has 19.8% of the vote, which is 52,000 votes. But she, going into today, the polls only showed her at 10%. So she doubled her support. Now, how did she do that? I mean, it's up in the air. But the thing that happened most recently...
I'll tell you how she did it. It's just media. It's purely media. So if the media weighs in and puts their thumb on the scale, then you can have a Klobuchar surge. But what those surges show you with Pete and Amy is that the old people are the ones that get that wind in their sails. They get it straight from corporate media. Old people watch corporate media. Young people, not as much. So the old people gave Amy and Pete their surges, and it's all because of the media. So that's the enemy that we have to fight here. That's why the Bernie or Bust show exists. We have to get around the media. The media are directly affecting the way old people think. It's manufactured consent. So it's heartening that Bernie has all the younger voters. It's heartening that going forward, the older voters are going to die off. But in the meantime, we have to do something to get the word to the older voters. Maybe the younger voters can talk to them. I don't know what is going to get through to them. They're low information voters, even though they like to call other people that. They are the ones who are low information voters, and they're the ones being brainwashed by corporate media. Younger people, we need you to tell your parents and grandparents that they can't get their information from corporate news anymore if they want to know what's going on. They're being hijacked.
Now, after that, after Klobuchar, she came in third. Warren is all the way down at 9.3%. That is an abysmal showing. And she's going to get no delegates from this.
Right.
So, terrible showing for her. There's no path for her to get the nomination. She hasn't dropped out, but I mean, really, if she's being serious, she should drop out because it's delusional to think she has a shot at this point now.
And that's the point I wanted to get to. Kyle is right. Elizabeth Warren should drop out, but will she? No, because she's made a deal with the DNC that if she stays in and blocks Bernie and it goes to a brokered convention and they try to give it to somebody else, she'll be their vice president. And so who might it be? It could be anybody. It could be Bloomberg. It could be somebody who hasn't even run in the primary races. It could be Hillary Clinton. And make no mistake, they wouldn't run Hillary Clinton to defeat Donald Trump. They would run Hillary Clinton just to run anybody. So it doesn't matter who it is. It could be Mickey Mouse. All they care about is not allowing Bernie Sanders anywhere near the White House. So again, if you're a millennial Elizabeth Warren supporter, the best thing you could do if you want to defeat Donald Trump is to tell your friends, to tell their friends, to tell their parents and grandparents that we need to understand this. Elizabeth is done. Stick a fork in me. I'm done. Sagar makes a good point about vote blue no matter who, and Crystal just lets it go. So I'll tell Crystal here what I wish she would have said after Sagar raised this point.
Some speculation, and this is something that I think the Sanders team should break away from, that the vote blue no matter who mentality is suppressing turnout. Because people are thinking, I'm going to vote for whoever the nominee is, so I don't need to go out there and vote. That's actually a very dismissive attitude for a lot of people, and it's making it so that they're like, oh, I'll just vote for whoever the standard bearer is, whenever the actual war is over what that standard is going to be against Trump. So I'm fascinated actually to see the Sanders response to that, because he keeps going out there. I think he was pressed by Chuck Todd on NBC News over the weekend. He's like, will you even campaign for Michael Bloomberg? He was like, yeah, sure. But I'm like, I'm not sure he should be saying things like that.
Yeah.
Actually,
I don't think Nina Turner should be dismissing the Bernie or Bust, Bernie or Trump voters either. She just smiles. I think she knows we're out there. I think she knows we're helping. But I think they should actually give us a little encouragement. I think they should say to the MSM people, mainstream media people, I think they should say, look, these voters are out there. We can't control them. You know we can't control them because they sure didn't do what Bernie told us to do last time. So I think maybe you ought to wake up and pay attention. And I think they are. I think the MSNBC crowd is figuring out that the Bernie or bust movement is definitely a threat. And Bernie or Trump, they don't seem to want to talk about it at all, but Steve Bannon did. And so what we have here is a total, and Bill Maher didn't pick that up. Bill Maher didn't talk about that at all. So what we have is a real threat, that especially the Bernie or Trump voters in swing states, that nobody is going to talk about. But I think we should just talk about it the way Sagar is, if nothing else. We can just say vote blue no matter who is a way to suppress the vote. And it's also a way to say to people that the Bernie or bust movement isn't real. Right now, the Bernie or Trump voters are a bigger threat than the Bernie or bust voters. But if people get pissed enough, if people keep seeing Elizabeth stay in when she should have dropped out a long time ago, she should have endorsed Bernie last time. If people get pissed enough at the voter purging, the voter rolls being purged, at the ballot machines being tampered with, voting apps that change the vote tallies, if we keep seeing this kind of rigging, they can expect a lot of people to say, hey, fuck it, I'm Bernie or bust.
Made it so that you remove the agency of choice to people who might be on the fence for actually voting for you.
Well, in that department, I mean, first of all, he did increase turnout among young people, which is an encouraging sign, and among people of color, which is also encouraging sign, working class people of color. But I think the point is well taken. I would say that the new rhetoric around Pete Buttigieg, which is whose side are you on, right? Are you with the billionaires or are you with the people? I think that is actually a very useful framing, not only for Pete, but if Biden makes the comeback, which doesn't look entirely likely right now, but you never know. You don't want to write these people off because we don't know how black voters are going to ultimately vote once we get to the South, past New Hampshire, and also very good framing against Michael Bloomberg.
Yeah, and that was the thing is with Trump is...
So she just missed it. She just missed it completely. What she could have said was to the vote blue no matter who crowd, hey guys, that ain't gonna cut it. You got to get in. You got to vote for the one person who can defeat Donald Trump. She had that opportunity, and she didn't say it. Sagar lobbed the pitch right over the center of the plate, and she just went somewhere else. I'll conclude with the idea that I think it's up to the Bernie or bust crowd to make it abundantly clear to Elizabeth Warren supporters, not necessarily to Elizabeth. I'm not saying to send another plague of snakes to Elizabeth on Twitter. But I would say that we need to have discussions with Elizabeth supporters and make it very clear to them that Elizabeth can't win. And what do you want, Trump? And we need to make that discussion happen so that we can go forward in the primaries without any more pretending that Elizabeth is viable. And when all of Elizabeth's supporters leave her, I think maybe then it's going to be really embarrassing for the DNC to admit that the only reason she's there is to block Bernie.
Get on board the Bernie or bust train. Come get on board the Bernie or bust train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Go get on board the Bernie or bust train.
The preceding episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television.